Welcome back to Spot of Red. I was talking to a friend yesterday about the parity of college football, and it's been great this season. Not four or five teams winning all the time. Even though there was only three losses in the top 25, there was still a lot of movement for me in the top 25. And you will see it when I start with the 25 through 12. So, moving into week 12, man, it has been flying by this year. As you can see, we're going to start with who got bumped out of my top 25. And I know it's a big bump, but LSU, that devastating loss to Alabama, 42 to 13, that's their third loss. I know there's some other schools in my top 25 with three losses. That's a second straight game that they have just got their butts whooped. Texas A&M the week before, Alabama this weekend. Their other loss was to USC, who doesn't even have a winning record. They did beat Ole Miss. They had to come back to win that game. That's their only top 25 win. But the way they're playing, I just can't keep them in the top 25. And they are the only team to get bumped out of my top 25. We'll start at number 25. They're actually going to get bumped down one, but it's UNLV. They beat Hawaii yesterday 29-27. I bumped them down because they just keep barely winning, but I still like to keep another Mountain West team that has played really well. They have beat a lot of teams that other teams have been struggling with. Plus, one of only their two losses is against Boise State, and they played them very well. Falling down to the 24th rank is Iowa State. They lost to Kansas yesterday, 36 to 45. I had them all the way up to 14th because the week before they were in my college football playoff. They were undefeated, but they just keep getting beat. That's 2 weeks in a row that they've gotten beat. So I had them drop down. Kansas doesn't have a winning record, even though they're playing a lot better, but that's why I had them fall into 24. Moving into my top 25, at 23, I have South Carolina. They've had two really good weeks. They beat Vanderbilt yesterday 28 to 7, and then we all know they had a huge win against Texas A&M the week before. I like to put teams that are playing well into the top 25 because if they continue to do so, they will keep moving up those rankings. Moving up just a little more as well. At 22, I have Arizona State. They beat UCF 35-31. Even though I have them in the top 25, they only have two losses. They actually play Kansas State this week and then BYU the next. So they have two tough games coming up. And if they can get that offense rolling a little more, they have a top 30 defense. But they need to get that offense rolling a little more to have a good shot at beating these two teams. If they beat both of them, they'll be going to the championship and possibly having a rematch with BYU. But they've got to play Kansas State first. And Kansas State has been on a bye, so you know they've been studying a lot of film, getting prepared for Arizona State. So that kind of bodes not so well for Arizona State. But anyway, should hopefully it'll be a good game. And speaking of Kansas State, I have them at 21. They moved up one spot, and like I said, they were on a bye, so not much to talk there. I had Texas A&M moving up a spot to rank 20th. They were on a bye as well. Louisville moved up a spot to 19. They were on a bye as well. So those three teams basically get to move up because I had LSU falling out. Moving up from 23rd to 18th is Dion's Buffaloes of Colorado. They beat Texas Tech 41 to 27. And if you know me, you know I'm not a big Dion fan. I just never have been. I'm from the Atlanta area. I think he gets too much props for what he really didn't do as an Atlanta Falcon. But anyway, that's almost a video in itself. He's got his team playing well. And they were only expected to win roughly 5 games this year, and now they're fighting to be in the Big 12 championship. They have an easy schedule, well, a pretty easy schedule for the remainder of the season, but they still need Kansas State and Iowa State to lose one more game. The reason I'm saying that is to give them an easier path into the championship game. They have to have Kansas State lose because they have the head to head over them. And I don't know the tiebreaker for the Big 12. They might have the ability to overcome Iowa State, but they can win out, and then they really need Kansas State to lose at least one more. So if Arizona State beats them, then Kansas State and Iowa State play at the end of the season, and that would be that third loss, and that would help Colorado get to the Big 12 championship. Because at the moment, they need to get into that championship to win it, to get into the college football playoff, to me, unless there's just a lot more carnage in the next 3 weeks. Moving up a few spots as well to number 17 is the Pac-2 champion right now, the Washington State Cougars. They beat Utah State 49-28. They're gaining ground on the group of six. I call it the group of six because I guess Pac-2 falls into the group of five now. But they're moving up. They only have Army and Boise State in front of them. And speaking of Army, that's who I have at 16. They beat North Texas 14-3. Their next game is Notre Dame in 2 weeks. And man, they could really use that bye to get a little more healthy. Daly only threw the ball 4 times yesterday. They ran it a lot. And some of their strong suit has been they've been throwing the ball more. They're going to have to throw the ball more to have any shot at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is built like a Power 4 team. They have so much speed that they can get around and easily maneuver within that option system. So Daly needs to get healthy so that they can throw the ball and have a shot at Notre Dame, which at this point I'm not really sure. Moving up to 15th is Clemson. They beat Virginia Tech 24-14. They played Pitt this week. I had bumped Pitt out of my top 25 last week, and then they ended up getting beat by Virginia, so it kind of worked out. I wouldn't expect Pitt to be ranked after this week either. Even with Miami losing, Clemson has a tough road to even get to the ACC championship. SMU only has 1 loss. They don't really play anybody. They have a good shot of winning out. Miami, huge loss yesterday, but they only have Wake Forest and Syracuse. And after yesterday, maybe it's a wake-up call for them. But Clemson's got to have one of them two to lose, and then they'd still have to win the tiebreaker. So Clemson's shot of getting into the CFP is very slim right now. I just think they need too much help. But you never know. The way Miami week to week looks like they can get beat by anybody. SMU definitely looks like the stronger ACC team at the moment. But we'll see in the next few weeks where they stand. But for right now, I have them at 15. Okay, falling to the ranked 14th position for me is Boise State. I had them in as number 10 last week. I had them in the top 10. But they barely beat Nevada 28-21 yesterday. Nevada hasn't won any conference games. They're now 3-8. And I keep saying this. Genty is incredible, but they can't keep riding his back. He had 34 carries yesterday. If they don't find a way to start lightening the load, I don't know if he's going to be worth anything in the playoff to begin with. But I know they probably want to control the clock, but Matson, their quarterback, he only threw 20 attempts yesterday. He only had 9 completions, which is less than 50%. I mean, they've got to find a way to produce more offense. And they only had 3 other carries from a running back yesterday. The quarterback had 8 attempts, but half of them could have been, scrambling, just running, but only giving the ball 3 other times to 2 other guys. One guy had 2, one guy had 1 carry. I just don't see how that is sustainable. But looking at their schedule, they have San Jose State next. That's the only team they have remaining with a winning record. They're 6-3. that they need to look really good against them. Then they play Wyoming, who is 2-7, and then they play Oregon State, who is 4-5 right now. But they are the top team for the group of six. But if Army finds a way to beat Notre Dame and they're undefeated, man, that's going to be hard for Boise State to pass them if that happens. Or even Washington State at this point, if Washington State continues to win out. So they have a few more weeks to be able to stay in that top position to get that automatic bye into the college football playoff. Falling to 13th from 5 is the Miami Hurricanes. Huge loss yesterday to Georgia Tech. They got beat 23-28. And I don't know what it is. Georgia Tech has their number. They just made a very stupid decision last year to lose to them. But yesterday, Georgia Tech just ran it down their throats. Then Ward just didn't have enough magic left to bring them back for the win. Now look, this team still has no top 25 wins. I mean, they have beat Louisville, who is now ranked, but they wasn't at the time. With that being said, they can still control their own destiny, so to speak, to make to the ACC championship. I misspoke earlier. Clemson actually, they only have one loss in the conference. Now Miami has one loss. Clemson actually still has a great chance of making the ACC championship. They would just need Miami to lose one of their remaining games, and they would have to win out. The other thing that's different right now is these top three teams, none of them play each other. So the tiebreaker might come down to who has the highest rank, which Miami, even with their loss yesterday, I don't know how the college football playoff will see that, because I see SMU with a top 25 win against Pitt and a very close loss to BYU. And they already showed us last week that a quality loss seems to be more than a quality win, as when they put Ohio State above Georgia. That's before yesterday. But anyway, it's going to be a close race to see who gets into the ACC championship. And if Miami or Clemson stumbles one more time, Louisville is sitting right there wanting to get in as well. And I think that's a dangerous team considering how Clemson and Miami is playing. But I have Miami falling 13th. At 12, oh man, this hurts. But my Dogs fall from number 2 to 12. Yes, should they fall 10 spots? Abso-freaking-lutely. They went to Ole Miss and just got dominated on both sides of the football. As I said, they got beat. I had Ole Miss as 15th. They lost 10-28. And man, the fall of Carson Beck just keeps breaking my heart. Like, I thought he was going to be much better this season. I think a lot of it, and I apologize for my bias, but I wish I wish they would fire him. He drove me nuts when he was our OC before. He loves to run screen after screen after screen after screen. Oh, wait. I think he just called another one. I can hear it on the mic. He's calling to run a screen right now in practice, I'm sure. The only thing Georgia has right now, they have two big top 15 wins. Clemson, that 34-3 beginning of the season win, and then the huge win against Texas. But now they have two losses. They lost to Alabama, who was 4 at the time, and now with this big loss against Ole Miss. This one hurts because of the score and how much they got dominated by. But at the moment, I have my Dogs falling out of the college football playoff with those two losses. They're going to have to do better. They're going to have to play much, much better next week against Tennessee. If they lose against Tennessee this coming week, it's over. I mean, they're definitely out. At the moment, if they can beat Tennessee, I think they're going to have a really good shot at getting into the playoff. I don't think they have a shot in getting to the SEC championship anymore, but they could at least get into the playoff. So there it is. For week 12, that is my 25 through 12. Moving on to the college football playoff teams, we'll start at The 11th ranked Penn State. They move up 2 spots. They beat Washington yesterday 35-6. And I keep talking about this, but they only have that one top 25 win. It was ranked 19th Illinois 21-7. This team still doesn't impress me, even with their win yesterday. But they only have one loss, and their strength of schedule is really good. It's at 30th. And as you can see, they're going to finish their season pretty easily. Purdue's not good. Minnesota's okay. Maryland got destroyed by Oregon yesterday. So they should have a pretty easy road to finish up the season. Illinois is not ranked anymore, but I just don't know about this team. They just haven't played enough teams to me to really see. The only good team they played was Ohio State, and to me, Ohio State dominated that game. But I'll talk about their player of the game real quick. Abdul Carter, their defensive end, he had 6 tackles with 2 sacks. And that's pretty much all I got to say for Penn State. They're in the playoff for now. Moving up 2 spots to the ranked 10th position is SMU. The Mustangs, they had a bye yesterday. And I'm not putting the AP rank in because I'm doing this before they release the rankings. No player of the game because they didn't play. Their last 3 games, they have Boston College, Virginia, and Cal, all 3 winnable games. If they win out, they're going to the ACC championship. Their offense and defensive ranking didn't move that week. Now, their strength of schedule dropped 10 spots for not playing this week. And with the remaining 3, their SOS is not going to move much. But for right now, they are in the best spot to make the ACC championship because they have 0 losses in the conference, and the way they're playing, they should be able to beat those 3 teams. Moving to the 9th ranked position, from the 11th position, I have the Alabama Crimson Tide. Man, did they lay it on LSU in Death Valley. That was good gracious, that was nuts. That's why I had LSU falling out of my top 25. They had zero answer for Milroe. The kid was running. If you look at the player of the game, he is my player of the game, but I put him as a running back because that's basically what he was yesterday. He had 185 yards on the ground with 4 touchdowns, and he only passed for 109 yards. He's basically becoming a running back. I mean, to beat Alabama, you need to do 2 things. Double team the 17-year-old and spy Milroe. Find your fastest good tackler, put pressure on him, and you have the formula to beat Alabama. They will not be able to score. If you look at their losses, it's just people were slowing Milroe down. That's what you have to do when you have such an incredible athlete. Georgia couldn't do it. That's why Georgia got beat. They couldn't contain him when he started scrambling. But yesterday, half of his runs were called runs. Like, just go. But that's the key for Alabama. Why do I keep moving them up? Because they do have 2 quality wins. And their 2 losses are very close losses, and one against a top 10 team. And they still have a possible shot at the SEC championship game. Heck, there's like 8 teams within 1 game of making the championship game. The SEC are cannibalizing each other, but I love the parity. I love it. Bring it on. This is good football. I know everybody's getting tired of Georgia and Alabama winning all the time. So it's great to have all these other schools playing well and have a shot at making the championship game. Moving to the 8th ranked position, I have the Ole Miss Rebels with their huge win over number 2 Georgia, 28-10. My player of the game for them actually is Coach Kiffin. Look, after last year, they got destroyed last year, and he asked for more help. And he hit the portal, and he strengthened the trenches like he said he was. And that was the difference yesterday. The defensive line was all in Beck's face. They contained the running game. They got fumbles to turn the game because Georgia seemed to be coming back. They got that huge fumble. And then they gave Dart all day to throw all over the field. Big props to Lane Kiffin and his ability to get what he needed to do to beat the bigger teams. Now they have a bye week, and they only have Florida and Mississippi State, two winnable games, and they have a huge shot at making the SEC championship. Really, to me, the only stumble they could, Florida might be ready by then with Lagway. If not, if Warner has to play, that's a win because that kid is not good enough to play in the SEC right now. You can see their offensive ranking, their defensive ranking, and their SOS. They are in prime position. Even if they can't make it to the SEC championship, they're definitely going to get into the college football playoff. Ranked number 7, the Indiana Hoosiers beat Michigan yesterday 20-15. It's their program's first 10-win season. If you've been watching Game Day, Cignetti has turned this team around. It's an amazing story. In 2 weeks, they play Ohio State. If they win, they're in the championship game for the Big Ten and pretty much would cement their college football playoff chances. I think for sure, even if they lose to Ohio State and they barely lose, I still think they have a small margin to get into the CFP. If you look at their strength of schedule, that 100th, and that's kind of rough, but their national defense and offensive ranking is pretty high. Granted, that is probably because of their strength of schedule. Their player of the game was Aiden Fisher. He's their linebacker. He had 14 tackles, but what a big win for them yesterday to get that. Not only their first 10-win season, but they're starting the season off 10-0. That's incredible in itself. I mean, literally, if they beat Ohio State, they're pretty much locked into the playoff and definitely the Big Ten championship. If they lose, it's going to be tough because Ohio State doesn't play enough good teams to maybe lose one more. They do have Michigan, but I just don't think Michigan's going to beat Ohio State this year. At the 6th ranked, you have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They slaughtered Florida State yesterday, 52-3. They still have those 3 top 25 wins, and honestly, they're going to walk into the college football playoff. I don't think Army really can beat them. I don't think Virginia can beat them. Maybe USC. USC might be the only team that's going to keep them from making the college football playoff because they're not in a conference, as everybody knows. So they don't have a conference championship to worry about. So their conference championship is USC, who is 4-5 right now. So Army at 16th right now for me is really their only game left. And we saw what they did to Navy, and Navy is built so much like Army. I know Army's defense might be a little better, but I just don't see them losing that game. Talk about their player of the game real quick. I have Riley Leonard. He's their quarterback. He had 215 yards passing with a TD, and then he had 70 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns. But as I said again and again, we'll see them in the college football playoff, and I think they'll get destroyed by whoever they play. At the 5th rank, we have the Tennessee Volunteers. They beat Mississippi State 33-14 yesterday. They move up 3 spots for me. They still have some good quality wins. They beat Alabama, Oklahoma, NC State. Well, I would say one quality win, even though you still would count the other ones. Oklahoma, NC State have not been in the top 25 for a while. And then that one Arkansas loss is their only blemish right now. But watch out for next week. They have the Georgia Bulldogs that they have to travel to Athens. Nico doesn't scramble or run a lot, and Georgia will be able to tee off and just go after him, kind of how they did against Ewers. So that game might be a lot closer than the Ole Miss game for Georgia. We'll have to see if their offensive line, Tennessee's, can hold up against the Georgia pressure, or they might have to move Nico around because Georgia struggles with that. This is another team with a great shot at making the SEC championship. I mean, if they beat Georgia, they still have to play Vanderbilt. So they still have two pretty tough games to get through. And even if they lose against Georgia, Tennessee has a decent resume. They still might have a good shot at making the college football playoff. And before we move off of Tennessee, their player of the game was Dylan Sampson, running back, had 149 yards and a touchdown. Their offensive and defensive ranking is looking really good. I mean, they're still 35th strength of schedule, so those rankings probably hold up pretty true, except for offensive ranking a little bit. They've been still struggling a little bit in the first half, so we'll have to see how that first half goes, because Georgia hadn't been a first half team either, so that first half could be pretty boring, and then the second half could be truly exciting. But right now, Tennessee at number 5. Moving on to the fourth ranked team for me is the Ohio State Buckeyes. They don't move. They beat Purdue 45 to nothing. The third time in a row, I actually have their linebacker Cody Simon with 6 tackles and a half sack as their player of the game. Their last 3 games is Northwestern, and then the big game with the Hoosiers in 2 weeks, and then they have the big game with Michigan. Their rankings as far as their offense and defense is pretty good. I mean, 14th and 2nd, considering their strength of schedule is 26, which is so weird to me because they only have one top 25 win, and that's Penn State. But I guess with the rest of the Big 12 being pretty decent, it helps their strength of schedule. I mean, I would say, like, I would agree with the defensive ranking. That number 2 in the nation, because that defense is stout. I just don't know if I can. That offensive ranking of 14th. After watching them against Penn State, I'm not so sure about that. But their big game coming up is Indiana, and just like Indiana, if they win that game, they're in the playoff. They're definitely in the Big Ten championship, and it'd be a fun rematch against Oregon. But if they lose, that drastically hurts their CFP. But with all the other 2-loss teams in the SEC, and they could possibly go to 3, that still would open the door for Ohio State to get into the college football playoff. Ranked number 3rd for Spider Red would be BYU. I have them staying, even though they escaped. And when I say escaped Utah yesterday, they barely did. They had a game-winning field goal to win 22-21. That's why my player of the game is Will Farron. He actually had 3 field goals yesterday with that game winner. Huge win for them. The reason I'm keeping them at number 3, because I think Kansas State might be better than Penn State. And I think that quality win, on top of them beating SMU, which is a top 10 team now too, that just works better for me against Ohio State. And that's why, I mean, they've won every game, and I will keep having them up that far. The reason I didn't put Indiana, the other undefeated team, as high is because of their strength of schedule, and they have no top 25 wins. So BYU is going to stay at number 3. Their last 3 games, they have Kansas, and then they play my 22 Arizona State, and then they have Houston. Kansas playing a lot better. Arizona State, a good football team. Houston, you see what they did last week against Kansas State. So they have 3 tough games to end the season, but I think they can win all 3 and be one of the few remaining teams undefeated. And they have a really good shot at getting to the Big 12 championship. And just like Colorado, they were not expected to win much this year. I think Colorado was at 5.5 games. I think BYU was only supposed to win like 4.5. I know you're supposed to round up, but really that comes down to, for me, I would say 4 wins. So, I mean, they're already much higher than that at the moment. They are 9-0, so they've already doubled what they were supposed to win. And then they have their next 3 games. Their strength of schedule actually moved up this week. And with the last 3 games, I think it will creep up more and more. It'll get to the point where it'll start leveling out, just like their offense and defensive rankings have. So BYU stays at number 3. The number 2 team in the land is Texas, moving up 4 spots just because I think they're still that good of a team. And they beat Florida 49-17. A huge dominant win against the Gators. Quinn Ewers threw for 333 yards with 5 touchdowns. Their last 3 games are tough too. They have Arkansas, Kentucky, and then the big one against Texas A&M, which could determine, like I said last week, who goes to the SEC championship. Offense, defensive ranking are pretty good. Their strength of schedule is 55th. That will be moving up over the next 3 weeks, I'm sure. And then, like I said, it'll probably level out. But big win for Texas. Another reason I moved them up is because they're one of the few teams that have 3 top 25 wins. The only problem with those 3 top 25 wins is none of them are remaining in the top 25 at the moment. And now with Georgia losing again, that loss to Georgia kind of hurts. But I still think they're better than BYU, Ohio State, and Tennessee. But that last test, having to go to Kyle Field, could be a tough one for them, or it could really solidify their ranking. I think they will beat Arkansas and Kentucky, and then that last game, who knows? It could go either way, especially with it being at Texas A&M. Remaining the number 1 team in the nation, the Oregon Ducks. They beat Maryland 39-18. And Terrence Ferguson, their tight end with 6 catches and 35 yards and a touchdown, is their player of the game. They only have 2 games remaining. They play Wisconsin at Wisconsin. They should win that one. And then they'll get a bye week before they play Washington. And the way Penn State played Washington yesterday, Washington seems to not be playing very well. Offensive defensive ranking is tied at 11th. They didn't move from last week. And then their strength of schedule dropped a little bit since they played a not so good Maryland team. But look, the Ducks are number 1 because they have beat Ohio State and Boise State, 2 top 15 teams, and they beat Illinois while they were still ranked at 20th, and they beat Illinois bad 38-9. Even though Boise State wasn't ranked at the time, like I said last week, to me that still holds up because of where Boise State stands right now. And if Boise State continues to win and they're going to get that automatic bid for the college football playoff, that keeps Oregon remaining in that spot. Now, look, if they have to go back and play Ohio State again in the Big Ten championship, that's a coin toss. But if they lose that game, they're in the college football playoff because they should be able to beat their last 2 teams. And no matter how well they play in the Big Ten championship, they would only have 1 loss, and that would look a lot better than the other ones. And then with their quality wins, Oregon is looking really good to have a shot at going all the way to win a national championship for Dan Lanning. So there's my top 11. Let's go ahead and get into how the bracket looks going into week 12. We'll start in the top left-hand corner. Your number 1 seed is Oregon. Your 8 seed, Indiana, would be playing the 9 seed, Ole Miss. Boise State would get that automatic bid for the 12th seed. They would play the 5 seed, Ohio State, which now leaves the new ACC champion, SMU. Miami's been holding that spot for a very long time, but now SMU gets that ACC spot. Moving in the top right-hand corner, you have BYU winning the Big 12. Then the 11th seed would be Penn State playing the 6th seed Tennessee. And then Alabama, the 10th seed, would play Notre Dame. I think that would be a blowout. And then your 2 seed would be your SEC champion, and that would be Texas. And that would be your playoff bracket going into week 12. Moving on to my Heisman watch, the only thing that has really changed is just the 4 players that are right there on the edge of trying to get in to New York. I still have Sean Dolick, who remains to have 10 plus tackles in every game. And then I have Dylan Gabriel move up to 5. He's playing so well for Oregon. I have Nick Nash moving to 6. He had 161 yards receiving yesterday against Oregon State. He leads the nation in receiving yards. And then I had Jay Higgins fall back a little bit, the linebacker for Iowa. He only had 4 tackles yesterday, and it was a big loss. They lost to UCLA. They really needed that win. But those are my 4 leading into the top 3. Let's look at the top 3 again. So I still have Cam Ward as number 3. I still have Ashton Genty as number 2, even though I keep talking about his payload. They've got to slow down his amount of carries. But he's so close to 2,000. He's only 266 yards from getting to that 2,000 mark, which is pretty impressive. And he has 23 rushing TDs. It's still an incredible year. I just wish they would lighten his load. He's actually second in the nation with the most carries at 224. And then my winner to receive the Heisman at this moment would still be Travis Hunter. He had 9 receptions for 99 yards and a touchdown yesterday. He's still getting some snaps on the defensive side, even though he didn't have a tackle yesterday. But this kid is still incredible. Even with him missing a little bit of time, I would still have him as the best player in college football and winning the Heisman. Well, that's all I got. That's going into week 12. Thank you again for listening to Spider Red. Tell somebody you love them. Go watch a football game. Even if it's not college, go watch an NFL game with some friends. Later.